Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, good people, welcome. I'm your host, Andrea Dragonfly, and this is the show Connected. And you know that if you've been following along, every show I talk about how this show brings forth different spiritual concepts, different conscious concepts for us to connect into. And the more that we can explore these ideas, the more information, the more connections we can make around them. And each show, I bring forth an idea or a concept, or I'm following off of something that I had talked about the previous show. Yet it's really an invitation for you to also seek out more information. There's also, I can only cover so much, and there's so much to cover over the duration of this whole show series, right? So it's an opportunity, it's an encouragement, because we could talk to many different people about the same subject, and each person is going to say something a little different that's going to land in us in a different way that, again, expands us, expands our consciousness, and connects us to other ideas that, or other, energy that's going to inform us in a new way. So again, every time, especially around different conversations, different topics, I always encourage everybody to continue to seek out more information and allow that in. Because sometimes we don't know what is out there. And that's why, early on in one of the earlier shows, I talked about what we know, what we don't know, and what we don't know that we don't know. So if we don't know that it's out there and we're being introduced to it for the very first time, sometimes we have, we're going to be like, oh, how do I feel about this? And we may definitely struggle with the possibility of that having truth in it, right? Because everything is about also helping you to find your own truth. What is true for you? And the more information you can gather, the more you can discern within yourself how this creates your truth. And so if there's something that you don't know, sometimes we have to try that on. We have to bring it into our energy field. We have to allow it to kind of inform us in a way that begins to expand us. And not everything's going to expand us the very first time we hear it, right? Sometimes we need to have a little familiarity with it, sit with it for a little while, try it on, take it off, play around with it, and allow it to exist. It's in existence. And if it's in existence, how do you want to connect with it, right? So these are always the invitations, is throughout all of our conversations to explore, play, seek out more information from different avenues, different teachers, different, wisdom keepers, different places on the YouTube or whatever, different courses even. So there's so much out there, and different delivery methods even, right? So trying that on and allowing it to really move into you and inform you. And because your conscious energy, you're already connected to the cosmic consciousness. So we can even invite that. We can invite it to come in and say, tell me more. Help me understand this deeper, better, more clearly. So we need to ask for what it is that we want. So I just want to, bring that forward again. And so this whole summer, we've been having a very, I guess we could say, a very lovely flow of conversations around karma. And we started early in the year with, when I say year, I'm talking about the summer cycle, actually. So early in the summer, when we're talking about the hero's journey, we're talking about seasons and cycles. And we're now moving into a whole new cycle, the fall season. And I even want to mention that next week is an eclipse, so we're moving back into the eclipse seasons even. And and so here we're moving the conversation of karma forward. And karma is definitely a topic that I spend a lot of time with. It's a huge part of my energy practice. It's a huge part of what I've devoted a big part of my studies, my life, my spiritual meditation practice, and my connection to my allies is to learning and discovering and being able to understand it for all beings, because each and every one of us is so uniquely different, right? And so here we're talking about family karma, lineage karma, ancestral karma. And last week I had a special guest, Lynn Christensen. She is a spiritual leader within her own community throughout Mexico, central Mexico. She's also does family constellations and different types of ceremonies as well. And she was on the show and we were talking about family constellations. So I'm going to do a little review about our conversation, because family constellations is a family systems therapy. And it's not normally looked upon as a way to understand family karma. However, the way that I look at it, all I can see is the karmic relationships, because that's what I come from. That's my background. That's how I see things. That's how I connect into things, right? And so I was able to invite her to talk about that. And if you happen to watch the show last week, we did have some technical difficulties. The live show got cut off about 14, 15 minutes in, and then we had to pick the live feed back up, and many people got disconnected. So if you weren't able to connect back on, I want to let you know that we did put the full show out there. We had to do some editing, bridge it back together, but that show is on my website at www.andreadragonfly.com/media. And that was episode 27. So Family Constellations with Sandra Lynn Christensen. So that is out there as well. And then I've also been out of town for the early part of this week. And so I also have some things that will be coming up on my website too, some media information. If you were interested in doing a family constellations or learning more about it, you can always learn more on, the interweb. And then, but if you wanted to work with Sandra Lynn Christensen on a family constellation, you could do that via Zoom, and I'll have that on my website as well. Now, I'm going to kind of hone in, because my experience of family constellations certainly can be, different than the way that the family constellations, family system therapy is often shown, especially if you're doing more research. Because what I notice is that when we come into our family dynamic, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, like we choose our family environment, we choose our lineage before we come into the new incarnation. We choose our parents even. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that, kind of flip-flop and they think about it and they're like, no, we don't choose our parents. And other people are like, oh yeah, we choose our parents, right? And so no matter what, our relationship is with our parents, we choose them. And we choose them because they're going to actually provide us with kind of foundational energy as to what we're going to be working with in this incarnation. And so, for example, and we can think about life, we can think about all sorts of different family dynamics. There's so many combinations. There's fathers that weren't there at all, and so child never met the father. There can also be mother was not there. Maybe mother died at childbirth even, but child survived. Child never met mother, right? But they're raised by father, and then stepmother comes in, or they're raised by mother and stepfather comes in, or they're raised, of course, by mother and father. So many combinations. So many. So, or they're raised by grandma or grandpa or sister, or somebody else in the family. And every one of those relationships is a very significant, who is the person that is the most significant in the child rearing years, the child developmental years. And even children who are being kind of bounced between family members or in foster care or in orphanages, all of that also plays out to be part of the foundational energy of what that individual came in to work with within their incarnation. And so with Lynn and sharing about the family constellations, really what we're looking at is we're having these very significant dynamic relationships between the feminine figure. We can see it as the mother figure, but we can also look at it as the feminine figure. We know that the mother can have many faces. We can have the very loving, gentle, kind, nurturing mother, and we can also have the very strict, mean, controlling, violent, even mother. So we have the extreme of how the mother figure can show up. And, oftentimes, even just within ourselves, if the shadow component, let's say you live a very, you know, conscious life where you are coming in to be the loving mother, but of course you have your shadow elements. Those shadow elements are those parts of you where when you're feeling attacked or disempowered or manipulated or controlled or whatever they are, you're gonna kind of like roar out, kind of like a lion is gonna jump out and attack, right? We're gonna have our own attack mechanisms, our defenses. And so sometimes, we're gonna yell, we're gonna kind of go into these shadow elements that are going to put our children in place. If you're a parent, if you're not a parent yet, that's, you can think about your own parents and if they've done that, or you can even watch this play out on television, other people's families, whatever. But that there's these different, dynamics that we all have of our light and our shadow in us. Same with the father connection. And that father connection too, right? So there's masculine energy. What does that masculine energy represent? And there's so many parts to that, because we can think about masculine being kind of like the sun connected to the moon mother energy, light in the darkness. We can have dryness and the moistness. So we're also looking at duality. We're looking at how, we have these like dualistic natures to certain things. And we're looking at really the traditional energetics, because technically we have all of those within us. We are masculine and feminine within ourselves. We have the feminine egg and we have the masculine sperm. And then when those two come together, we usually come forward in a gender. Well, we definitely come forward in a gender. And then we move and have our experience of our incarnation within that gender. And I am going to do a show specifically on gender, the law of gender, everything that's happening around transgenderism and everything, and of course the LGBT relationships within spiritual incarnations, like what it's all about. But we're not going to talk about that today, but we are going to have that in the future conversations. But we have this gender, we have it within us. So we're going to have an experience to the world based on our gender, based on our culture. To be a woman in the United States is very different than to be a woman, let's say, in Afghanistan, right? Or possibly in China, and, in some other different places around the world. So, and all of that is what we pick in that family dynamic. And then our siblings are going to be playing out with us as well, right? And so we have this mother-father relationship. And even with talking with Lynn last week, the first child, and we are going to go to a break here in just a few minutes, but so I'm going to dive a little bit more into what each child represents when we get back from the break. But I do want to say, within our relationship, it is all about us having these relationships to the feminine and to the masculine. And then our siblings are going to actually be kind of like a fraction or a fractal of our father-mother, depending on what our relationship is with our siblings. I also mentioned previously, probably a couple of weeks ago, that our siblings, we could have really great connected relationships with our siblings, or we can be very competitive, We can have a bully sibling, right? At that, we can have, so our dynamic within our sibling relationships also has a lot of information. And that information is definitely that part that this is our family unit. And the siblings can even go into like step siblings, half siblings, because if you're around somebody in your youth as you're developing and growing up, and you have a significant dynamic with them, and let's just say it's a hard one, it's a struggle, you don't get along very well with that sibling is really there representing a theme for you because you're going to be around them somewhat frequently. If it's a half sibling, maybe you only see them half the time, but depending on all the different dynamics. But within that, each one of these family relationships is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that you actually chose before you were incarnated for that family environment to actually bring your personal karma in with your lineage karma to provide the environment for you to overcome. So we talk about karma as this place of balancing out the imbalances. We talk about karma as this law of action and reaction. We talk about karma as the third law of motion, and for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So our karma actually creates this almost like this behavioral guide based on what we've done in past lives that's going to bring it into the new life for us to reset, to recenter. It's the opportunity. Whether we do it or not is up to us, but it's up for us to bring it back into a balance. So we're going to take that quick break, 2 minutes. We're going to get back and we're going to dive into those relationships and look further into how we can even move ourselves into the healing the lineage wound, not just with our family, our siblings, not just with our parents or siblings, but also with our cousins, our grandparents, and our future generations, as well our children, their children. So I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. We are talking family dynamics. We're talking about how we come in and we choose the family system. We choose our mother and our father. And the choices that we have with that are going to be key opportunities for us to work them within our incarnation, right? And so even looking at our family dynamic. So I talked a little bit about, we're going to have all sorts of different types of dynamics with our mother. And even with that mother, this is a really big of course, mother and father. They are the two most essential figures in our lives that are going to also help us understand ourselves and help us grow. And even in those dynamics, and I'm going to use mother and father together because based on time and how much time we have to talk about all this, because even if let's just say our mother or father figure comes in with some sort of personality disorder. And this personality disorder is oftentimes we can be looking at it like narcissistic. It's about power, control, manipulation. It can be something that instills a lot of fear into the child, but it's all about control in one way, whether it's mother or father, the feminine, the masculine, and each of those play out in different ways, right? um, that this is this person, the incarnated being, the person's opportunity to recognize that these are the dominant figures within that person's life. Let's just say both of them are there. And usually we get one, two controlling parents will end usually in some sort of divorce because they're both trying to control. You have to have one that controls and one that submits to the other person's control, oftentimes for that family dynamic to work out, long term at least. And I can't say that it's always that way. I'm sure there's always going to be the anomalies. There's always going to be those relationships that are that way, but that's not normally how it works, right? Because you have to have an alpha and you have to have somewhat of a beta within the parenting team. And we also talk about how every 7 years those they flip. So if mom was the alpha and then 7 years later, dad can become the alpha, mom becomes the beta around certain things. So that's a whole nother level of energy and information that I'm not going to fully get into today, but that is there as well. So I just want to say there's so much information here. So trying to find all the little threads of the energy and pull them forth. But usually what we're going to have is we're going to have one of the parents is going to be a dominant energy. And the other one is going to be possibly more of a submissive energy, right? And so even in that family dynamic, parents, whether it's mom is dominant, dad submissive, vice versa, dad dominant, mom submissive, we're going to have that kind of playing out in some way, maybe. And of course, there's also all those relationships that don't have that, and mom and dad are really aligned and healthy and working together. However, we look at life, and that's not nearly as prevalent in the mainstream of all humanity, right? So we want to just recognize that there's all these different roles, these different, dynamics that are playing out. But even within that, we are being presented with a dominant figure, a dominant parent, and how that dominant parent is showing up for us. And even so, most children, of course, they can emancipate themselves usually around 16, if you're in the United States, I believe. But then, most of us children or who have children, we have them up until 17, 18 before they move on, right? And moving on means they could go to college. We all know what that means, however they can leave the house. If the house is an unsafe environment for them, then yes, they're going to want to get out of there as soon as possible. Now, the early formative years are also let me see if I can get my words out here. Those early formative years are also those times of the years that we're developing. And if we're developing in a place where we're always kind of shut down, not allowed to go play, not feeling that we have places to express ourselves, if we're shut down, meaning our voice isn't heard, we're not being listened to, our needs aren't getting met. And those needs, if we look at, the general population of humanity, some of those needs could even be basic food, clothing, shelter, some of the basic fundamental needs to raise a child. And then some of those other needs are going to be more emotional, more mental and being able to problem solve. Maybe you don't have a parent, or the dominant parent that's always in, that person's life isn't helping them problem solve, isn't helping teach them life skills or things like that. And of course, even within certain family dynamics, and I've heard this for 30 years now, I think the family constellations even talks about it, is that really your parents are here to bring you into the world and to keep you alive. That's like the main objective of what the parents are here to do. If you have loving parents, then you're really lucky, because not everybody gets that, right? But we all get these opportunities. And so we're playing with the whole trajectory of what's possible in family dynamics. So again, if I'm talking about you have that dominant parent that might have a personality disorder, again, I've talked about narcissism, there's borderline personality disorders, there's all sorts of things out there within, you can just check out in the psychology world, where that parent is always kind of being mean in some way, to say it as tamely as possible. And so this is our opportunity to recognize that even though this is my environment that I'm being raised and developing in, this is an opportunity to recognize throughout my incarnation, my lifetime, that what I'm being told isn't necessarily the truth. This isn't something, so this is where we have to look within ourselves. If we're coming into an environment that says, oh, you're wrong, you're bad, whatever, fill in the blank, on that negative energetic level, part of our journey is to recognize that that is not true. That we are all, first of all, we're already connected to source. We're already, fully perfect in our spirit being, but that we've chosen a very hard path to walk that's going to come up where we're going to have lesson after lesson, opportunity after opportunity, scenario after scenario, where we're going to have to find our personal empowerment, because that was a disempowering upbringing, right? Now, if we have, let's, for example, have a family where both of the parents are healthy, loving, supportive, but they also are very kind of idealistic. They want for you what they want for you. And this, we can see a lot of this in different types of families that are deeply connected into religious backgrounds. We can see families that are deeply connected into socioeconomic backgrounds that have, like, we want you to be the lawyer, we want you to be the doctor, we want you to be the business person, we want you to take over the family business, we want you to follow this belief system. So there still is this place of, we are loving, we're supportive, we're going to give you all these, these gifts, and we're going to support you, but we also want you to do what we say. And that's another form of power, control, and manipulation. It's just a little bit more hidden. But if you as the individual are not experiencing free will and choice on your own, then there is something in the dynamic that is providing an opportunity. Because it always comes back down to us having to choose for ourselves, not being kind of like taught or being told, or having the program set within us that says that you are this way. Mom, dad thinks that you need to be this. You get the choice. This is the spiritual conscious path forward. You get to choose who you are. So being able to stand up to ideology, stand up to what it is within your family's dynamic that says, family, I love you, and I got to choose for myself, even if you're going to be written out of the will, even if you're going to be disowned because you're choosing a path of higher consciousness. Because oftentimes, even within there's judgment, especially if there's a strong religious background that says, this is the way that you are to worship God, and only this way, and you got to do it this way. Right? That's dogma. That's judgment. That is not the divine will of the above. That is actually what we're up having to stand up to. We have to come to that on our own. We have to make that choice. And part of that is that within all humanity, we are all divine beings. We are all here to have this human incarnation filled with opportunity after opportunity to make a different choice. So it's really within that, is that if you're in a family dynamic that is putting forth certain types of pressures on you or really breaking you down in your personal empowerment, disempowerment, these are the places for us to work on. This is what we look within ourselves, and this is what we begin to heal for the family lineage. It's not just within mom. It's not just within dad, but what mom and dad are holding are also coming down from the ancestral lineage. This lives within aunt and uncle on, or whomever is on mom's side of her siblings, also lives within dad's siblings, move it up to the grandparents, and then that lives within the grandparents. And of course, there's grandpa, grandmother on mom's side, grandpa, grandmother on dad's side. So the family tree begins to split. And it gets very, very energetically complicated. And so we're going to be looking at this as to how these energetics come down the family tree for us to be actually exposed to, for these opportunities to come to work us, right? And then I also just want to say, before we go further into that area, is that if you have the family that is the most loving, supportive, kind and generous and accepting of humanity, those families out there, and they absolutely exist, that said, yeah, you know what? Go be the best person you can be, and recognize that there's going to be people out there that are there to try to take advantage of you, and there's people out there that are going to try to be your ally and assist you in your greatness, and know that all of them are there to help grow you, right? All of them are there to help make you the best person. This is where we're moving. We're moving to those family dynamics. We're in this incredible time of that shift of humanity where we're waking up and we're having the opportunity to heal because we are moving in that direction. Are we going to arrive there in 5 years from now? More and more people will, but it won't be the dominant energetic of humanity. But we are slowly moving ourselves into that family dynamic. We're waking up, we're healing, we're growing. And more of those families are coming together to create that space so that we can actually move humanity in a forward, more conscious evolutionary state, right? This is what's happening. But again, we're at the very beginning of all of that. So we want to look at these things. We want to be able to see how they're playing out so that we can look at them within ourselves, right? And so we are going to look further into how they're playing out through the family lineage. Because what may have happened to, let's say, grandpa, now I am a Generation X. And so I'm just going to share where I'm at generationally. I'm a Generation X. My grandfather on my mother's side was in World War II. And so there's going to have, and many people, especially in the United States and even abroad, if you're within my age range, you may have had a grandparent also in war. And it doesn't even have to be World War II. It could be Vietnam. It could even be, even just something as, recent as the war in Afghanistan and everything that has been going on. I mean, we've had a series of wars over the last, I guess every generation has a war at some point. Hopefully it's not always going to be that way, but we can look at how war impacts people. Now we are going to get ready for another quick break. And when we get back, we're going to really look at how this energy comes through the family dynamic, through the lineages, how we get to experience them, and then what we can do to heal them. So bear with me, 2 more minutes on a break, and we'll come back and we'll get back to it. So thank you.
Did you know that your Your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating. Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. So over the break, I had a question that I was just reading. And the question is along the lines about why, if you had an abusive parent, oftentimes an abusive parent is most likely a product of an abusive other parent. Let me see if I can get this right. And then bullying raises a bully, right? And so why would we choose these parents? If we're coming in to choose these parents, why would we choose these? And so I think that's a great question. So thank you so much for that question. And so we choose the family because we're being presented with the opportunity to rebalance our own energy field, right? So if we look at this from a place that in our previous incarnation, so let's say in our previous incarnation, we were somewhat of a bully. So then we come in to this incarnation and we get a parent that's a bully because we were a bully, possibly in the last incarnation. And it doesn't have to be that it was exactly the last incarnation. It could have been a couple of incarnations ago because there's so many different things that are happening. But again, it's about the rebalance of energy. And so again, even within the laws of karma, for whatever energy we put out, we are going to have come back to us in equal measure, right? And so when we choose a parent that's a bully, we're being given the opportunity, or let's say an abusive parent, we're being given the opportunity to understand the impact of what it is to be at the effect of that energy, right? Now, we can cycle in and out of incarnations for several lifetimes, really being angry, hurtful, hateful, upset, all those lower vibrational energies, because we're being given the opportunity to make a different choice. And so you could have multiple lifetimes with an abusive parent, and then you become an abusive parent to your child as well, right? And then your child could become an abusive parent to their children because you're creating this lineage pattern of abuse. And somewhere in there, somebody's going to have to make a new choice. Now, we can make that within our future incarnations, or we can even look at this within our lineage, where we can actually begin to heal the wounds of that within our lineage. So let's just even say that great great grandpa was abusive, and great great grandpa could have been was in a war. He could have had PTSD. He then came home from war with PTSD. Of course, back in those days, PTSD wasn't identified. It wasn't known. There wasn't psychology in the same way that we have it today. All they know is that there's something wrong, with the men who came back from a very intense war. Soul loss happened in that war. And then they were abusive to their child. And then maybe their child grew up without a loving father, an abusive father, and it could even be the father. It could be masculine or feminine, right? It's but we can also see, like, sometimes we have the disconnected father, the disconnected son, the disconnected son, because there was never anybody to show the sons the masculine pathway, something different, what it is to actually love, what it means to be a man, and to know love, and to know compassion, and to know, so much of these earlier generations, and even the generation I live in, or that I'm from, is like, it's not okay for men to express emotion. It's not okay for a man to feel sad or to show tears. And oh my God, that is the worst thing for our energy bodies, our souls. Crying is actually the most healing energy for us to have that deep release that lives deep inside of us. It is so essential. And then there is this very masculine patriarchal story that was created that said, tough men need to make tough sons, and we have to have these during tough times, right? That it's not, you can't be loving, or you can't show that love. But it can also go down into the feminine line too, and you can have an abusive mother, right? And through the abuses. So the reason, so I just want to say again that these are these opportunities for us to make a different choice. If we don't make that different choice in this incarnation, we're going to see it again in another incarnation. Because again, we have to make that different choice. We have to understand, what is this about? So again, if it's abusive physical violence, even if it's, unfortunately, sexual violence, incest, rape, that does definitely exist in the world. If it's behavioral disorders of, locking children away in their rooms and whatever. I mean, so many horrors of humanity absolutely exist. That we're given these opportunities again and again and again to make these different choices. And so we can get caught in these karmic loops, right? But again, so they're going to play out in different ways. There's different dynamics. There's so much to this conversation. It's so filled with depth. There's so many nuances as to how all this can show up, right? Now, if we begin to be the conscious one, if we begin to say, I'm going to make a different choice, of course, we grow up, we're no longer in that family environment. How do I begin to heal myself from what has happened to me within my own family dynamic? How do I begin to heal the generations who've also been at that dynamic? We recognize, what has been the impact? What have I lost? How has this influenced me? What is this about me? So we start with ourselves. What has been the price I've paid to be in this dynamic? And we can also even look at this one with our partners, because people will pick partners oftentimes that play out some of the family dynamic, right? So we begin to look at our self-worth, our deserving. We begin to look at our place of where we've been disempowered. Maybe we lost our voice and we weren't able to be heard. Maybe we lost, so many things. There's so many things. So I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them, but think about this connected to you and your family. We all have family lineage karma. So how does it show up within you and your family? And you might have come from an amazing family, but there's still going to be the secrets. There's still going to be some things that need to still be worked out, even if they're much more mild than some other people's families, right? And so we begin to look at this for ourselves, and then we can start tracking it. And when I say track it, it means that we could go to that parent figure who was the one that was cruel, mean, whatever. And we begin to look about what was it like for them in their life? What was the cost for them? Because this is pain. This is, in a certain way, torture, soul torture. This is something that lives within them, suffering, that we want to begin to start tracking the suffering. We want to begin to start looking at it further and further down. Okay, so if this happened to my ex, let's say this happened to my mom or this happened to my dad. Now I'm going to go up the lineage to the next parent. Where did this come in? Did this come in from my grandfather, my grandmother, on whatever side of the family? Okay, then where, and what could it have been? And how can this continue, And so we want to look at the impact. We want to look at the suffering, the pain, the loss, And so this is where we begin to recognize I'm not alone. It's not just me. It actually goes further. But I want to heal it so that my children don't have to go through this. Now, children's lineage karma. This is what I've tapped into. This is what I work with. This is what really resonates as true for me. And is that we can actually help heal our children's karma before they reach puberty. But when they go through puberty, they start to connect to the lineage karma on their own. They become, they're shifting and transitioning into a different energetic field. And within that field, and they get into the teens, or the later teens, depending on when a person starts even, going through puberty. And then by that time, they have to work the lineage karma out themselves. But if we can recognize this within ourselves first, knowing that we have these little children, we can work it out in a way that we're not going to pass it on to our children. And so even so, of course, you don't want to, let's say you had an abusive parent in your life and you're like, I am not going to be an abusive parent to my children. And you work that. You work that within yourself, and then you're not that abusive parent. But it doesn't mean, so first of all, that's great. That's amazing. That's the first steps of shifting the lineage karma. But then we have to recognize, okay, it's not only what I'm doing, it's also, we talk about being. So we're human doing and human being, right? So if I'm still being at the effect mentally, if I still feel that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not, and then fill in the blank, whatever the I'm not is, that will still trickle down into the children. So we got to work on those parts of ourselves. And this is where that unconditional love, that compassion, and that forgiveness, and I swear they are the three most amazing, I'm calling them the Christ energy, whether you believe in Christ or not. I'm not talking Jesus Christ, I'm talking the Christ that even came into Jesus. But this is the high divine shift, the high divine evolution of our consciousness, is when we can see it from these expansive places of unconditional love, of compassion, of forgiveness. And now we can think mentally, all right, I know I need to forgive you. And all right, I forgive you. But we haven't shifted it in our energy field. We think it. We know we're supposed to forgive them. And I'm even saying, yes, I forgive you, but I'm still not feeling the shift. I'm still resentful. I'm still actually angry. I'm still all these things, because when we truly forgive, all of those feelings, they go away. And we are truly gifted with the spiritual medicine. We're truly gifted with the conscious expansion. We're truly gifted with the healing. Because the healing is when those no longer exist within us. And if we can track it through each of the generations and recognize, even if we don't know their story, but recognize and even just ponder and be with it and give that unconditional love. They didn't know anything different. This is what they came in. This is what they, they used the tools of what they had, which possibly were no tools whatsoever, right? And they were completely at the effect of their suffering, their pain, whatever. So we begin to look at this and we begin to bring that unconditional love, that compassion, that forgiveness to them as well. And it's almost like you become the parent of your ancestors that says, come here, I will be the one to change this. I will be the one to shift it. I will be the one to hold all the pain, all the suffering, all of what our family has gone through love and compassion and forgiveness. Now, I know that sounds like, wow, okay, yeah. And how do we do that? And that is the journey. That is the journey of how you do that. Isn't going to take just a moment snap. You're going to have to work that. You're going to work it in your energy field. It could take days, weeks, months, possibly years. But if you're really focused on that and you really want to change that and you're already conscious of enough to say, I want to change that, then you are already halfway there. You can do that. And so we look at what's blocking me, what continually comes up as my block that kind of holds me back from fully getting there, right? And so we look at those. We recognize, where's that coming from? Is that my past karma? Is that my lineage karma? Because of course, past karma and lineage karma, they're already connected. We picked that family to play out our past karma, right? So we want to begin to connect into these places within our karma, within our ancestors, so we can free it and alleviate this for our own future generations, or hold them. And there's secrets sometimes in the family karma that, family generations that we don't know anything about. Maybe you're adopted and you don't even know who your parents were, but you're still bringing forward the energetic that you came to work. So if you're having whatever behavioral struggles, those are going to be connected to the lineage of your biological mother and biological father. So we're nearing the end of our time together, and I absolutely invite you, if you have questions, by all means, you're welcome to bring them to my Facebook page, bring them to my Instagram if that's out there, bring them to my website. You're certainly welcome to to ask those questions. And I am going to carry this a little bit of this forward, because I'm going to bring in a whole nother element of what I work with a lot. And we're moving into the season. And we've talked a lot about ourselves, our relationship to energy, our relationship to other people, our energy dynamics between our feelings, our mindsets. And now I'm going to be moving it in to working with unseen energies, because we don't really talk about that in our general human experience. We're not taught that. It's not a huge part of our belief systems, whether, many of us don't even know what we believe. Many people are on the path of believing. But we're going to be moving into working with unseen energies, both benevolent, the good energies, and malevolent, the bad energies. Because when we have family dynamics that are really challenging, that have a lot of violence, a lot of pain and suffering in them, there's also other energetics that are playing out. And we also have other energies that are helping us get through. The benevolence are helping us get through this. The malevolent energies are really putting us to the test. And so we're going to move into talking more and more about them. And they are a huge part of consciousness, a huge part of expanding our consciousness. And so in this time that we have together, I just want to have you just take a moment. And we don't really have enough time to do a deeper connection, but I do want you just to take a deep breath. And I want you to connect into your lineage, your family dynamic. And I want you to kind of find that person or those people, because we can, because some of our siblings or our children or whomever are also playing out specific aspects of our ancestors, So even if, we can look at different kinds of things, alcoholism. We can look at drug addiction. We can look at any addiction, sugar, food addictions, so we can look at how, if this is coming down the generational pipeline, let's just say, coming down the family pathway, we can look to say that, oh yeah, cousin so-and-so has similar energies to grandpa or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I'm inviting you to begin to become aware of the energetics that live within your own family dynamic. Who carries what? Now be compassionate, be in that place of unconditional love, right? Be forgiveness. Don't judge. Judging is not helpful, but being compassionate is, because we're expanding our consciousness. We're beginning to look at, there's something here, and it can skip generations. And we're even going to talk about, in next week, I'm going to talk also about how we're talking about energetics. We're not talking about DNA. We're not talking about genetics, but I will talk about that somewhat next week as well. So there's so many aspects, there's so many parts and pieces to all of this. It's so interconnected. So I just want to say that I invite you for this week, or whenever you're getting this information, whether you see this show weeks from now, whatever, whenever you see this and this comes into your field, begin to sink in to how we're all connected within our lineage and how we can be more compassionate with each other, and how we begin to even just give that love and compassion and healing. We can still work them within ourselves, that can shift them within our family members. If they still have to do their work, we can't do the work for everybody. But when we do the work for ourselves, we begin to actually make it easier for everybody else around us too. And it also is, who do we show up to be? Can we show up to be that person that's loving and kind and generous and gentle and compassionate and forgiving? Because that truly is the path of our ascension. That truly is the path of us moving forward in our humanity. Truly. So I invite you to take that with you. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to bring this information. Again, I ask you to take this further. Play with it. Let it sit with you. Let it inform you. You may have heard other things from other people. All of that is information, and I encourage you to play with that and let it expand you, right? Connecting into all the different possibilities, infinite possibilities of our human experiences. And they're all going to be so uniquely different, right? So I'd also just like to say that at any given time, this is a live show. You're always welcome to, text through the Facebook page or whatever, any of those questions when I'm during the show. But if as I leave you, if there's anything else you need to say, you can connect with me at www.andreadragonfly.com / that's just my website. You can hit me up on Contact Me. And you can hit me up at any of my Facebook or my Instagram. Let's see. I always forget because I'm so bad at it. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. And if this speaks to you, if you're connected into this show and you like it, go ahead and you can click the like button or whatever, and I encourage you to pass it on to family members, pass it on to other people who can really find value in this as well. Well, this is the end of our hour. It's been a pleasure always. I wish you all a great week, and I hope to see you next week. So take care. Be well.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.